feels that about me as anti-porn, can you imagine what Daniel felt about growing up as the son of the laughingstock whore of the United States of America? No wonder when they did an autopsy, they found every drug known to human beings. And you know what? I think on some level she understood this. I think she understood the role that she had been forced to play, because this was a woman herself who was a victim of childhood sexual abuse. And remember, when her husband, she married a billionaire, okay, and then he died, he did not leave her one penny in his will. He was a billionaire. He knew she had no way to make money. She had a child to look after. He could have left her enough money to survive, and he didn't. And she had to go back into the sex industry. And when you think about that, and then to add insult, a few months after her son died, Hustler came out with this cartoon. And it says, Anna Nicole Smith's son's autopsy. And what it says is, I'll just have to go a bit nearer. It says, we have to invent a cover-up. All the tests conclude he died of embarrassment. This is the joke of burying her son. Because this industry knows what it does to women. It understands perfectly, right? They understand it. It just seems to be a few people with PhDs who are a bit confused. Now, let's talk about how this works. This is arguably one of the most, celebrated actresses in the world, Oscar winning. And she cannot resist slut culture. Do you think 40-year-old Nicole Kidman wanted to do this? Do you think this was her idea? Because she is, by all intents and purposes, seems a serious mother, concerned for her kids. What do you think happened? I think, and this is what happens to young girls, and it happens to all women, is that you are defined as either fuckable or invisible. And any woman reaching the ages of 40 knows exactly what that means, because you're aging out of fuckability into invisibility. Right? Now, young girls, this is the definition for them, fuckable. And what does that mean? When your friend is walking around with the low-slung jeans, do you call it a tramp stamp here, the same thing? Do you call it that? We call it... Oh, is that what you call it, the same? Okay, there. And the thong sticking out, and the pierced belly button. If your friends are walking around like that, an adolescent, right, you're an adolescent, you have a developmental imperative to be visible. That is written into your developmental DNA. What can you do to be visible in a world where all women are looking like that? In a world of Rihanna and Lady Gaga and Beyonce? You don't have a choice, because very few girls can stand being invisible. So when you think about even Nicole Kidman, and her handlers probably got together and said, listen, honey, you're reaching 40, we need to rethink who you are, just as they did with Jennifer Aniston. And of course, the woman who started it, who's got no more sense at 50 than she had at 20, Madonna. And what's interesting, on Q&A last night, this kid asked me a question. He says, well, what about Madonna and Lady Gaga? They're empowered. Hello, you don't make a general theory about women looking at these multimillionaires in the world. They are empowered. And no question, Lady Gaga and Madonna made this work for them. But ask the 14-year-old who's trying to figure out what it means to be female in this culture, if she can make it work for her, just like Madonna made it work for her. And then, of course, the absolute story of slut culture is Miley Cyrus. So here she is. She's aging out of Disney. And she has to look visible with Lady Gaga and Beyonce and all of those. She's got a problem. She's got the squeaky clean Hannah Montana image. So her handlers get together and they come up with a brilliant strategy. She has to go from Hannah Montana to fuckable looking Miley Cyrus. And of course Annie Leibovitz in Vanity Fair is only too happy to play that role. Did you have this big outcry when these pictures came out here? Okay. And this was one example. And this is her father. Yeah, would you like to sit like this with your father? And then, of course, her handlers come in and say, they even made poor Miley Cyrus apologise, as if this was her idea. Right? Talk about absolute cowardliness. And then, of course, there's an apology, and she's really sorry, and then next year this comes out, and it's morphed perfectly. Right? And now when you look at Miley Cyrus on a video, it has gone from squeaky clean Hannah Montana to fuckable Miley Cyrus, which she had to do. Choices, that was it. Very, very few choices in our society. And then, of course, we end up with French Vogue, like this and this. And so this is the new world. And how do we explain what's going on? Well, let me tell you, the person who explained it very best to me was not a PhD in media studies or women's studies. It was actually an incarcerated child rapist I like to call Dick. Now, Dick said to me, and he was explaining to me, okay, about how he groomed his daughter. Now, are you all familiar with what grooming is? Grooming is a process where a perpetrator hones in on an individual child. Usually, often it helps if the child is vulnerable or alone, because then they're easier to shame. And then you start to tell them how wonderful they are and how beautiful they are. And then what you do eventually is you chip away at their self-esteem. So they begin to think that the only thing that matters is how they look. So by the time that perpetrator rapes the child, A, is bonded to the perpetrator, and B, believes that it's deserving. Well, my argument is we now live in a culture with a collective perp. The culture is collectively perpetrating against our young girls. It is grooming them, just as Dick said. He said to me, he looked me in the face, and he said the culture did a lot of the grooming for me when he was explaining about how he got his 10-year-old stepdaughter to give him an oral sex. That's what he said to me. And I thought, you're exactly right. It's a collective perp. And so now we are basically grooming our girls to start dating boys who themselves are being groomed by the porn industry. And now we switch to where this is all coming from, which is, of course, pornography. Now, first of all, the pornography is over $97 billion a year. We don't know for certain. This is a very hard industry to track. This is one of the statistics that tends to be branded around. So probably somewhere in this ballpark. They make over 13,000 new movies every year. All right, this is the industry. Most of them are made in Los Angeles. So imagine this. There are 420 million porn pages on the internet. So we are saturated with pornography. Now, what's so interesting is, again, listening to these people at the Sydney Writers' Festival, you would think pornography is just a kind of collection of images. Let me tell you, it is an industry. And I study this as I would study any industry, the car industry, you know, the health industry, you name it. And the first thing we know is, like all industries, it raises capital, it hires managers and accountants, it organises trade shows, it has PR firms, and very, very importantly, it interfaces with banks, credit card companies, venture capitalists, cable operators. It is bang smack in the middle of Western capitalism. This is not some little group somewhere making these really, you know, avant-garde images. It is a corporation. And unless we understand how it works as a corporation, you're going to miss the big story here. So let me give you an example of how it works. In 2008, I went to Las Vegas to the porn show, the Porn Expo. So imagine this, 10,000 porn fans and me descend in Las Vegas. So I go around interviewing all of these guys there. And very interesting, they're bored, so they will talk and talk and talk. And this is where I got a lot of my information from. So I go up to one store, which is called Real Dolls. Anyone heard of this? Real Dolls? Okay, this is anatomically correct dolls, right? You can imagine what they look like. They are so specific that you get to decide what colour the pubic hair is, what colour the eyeliner is, what colour nail polish she has. It's made to your specifics. And it's about a 6 to 8 month waiting list. That's how much, right? And I said to them, oh, did you see the movie Lars and the Real Girl? Did anyone else see that with Ryan Gosling? Right. I said to them, did you see the movie? They said, did we see it? We were the consultants for the movie, and the day the movie came out, our website collapsed because so much traffic. So you can see here the intersectionality of corporations. It's no accident, okay, that when you look at People magazine or you turn on television, and you see this sanitized version of pornography. I mean, for example, at one point, Rupert Murdoch was making more money than most people from distributing pornography through one of his satellite companies. And then, of course, when you turn on a Rupert Murdoch company on TV or something and you see a sanitized version, this is economic synergy. This is how it works. We are dealing with an industry. And you know what? They would be what's the word I'm trying to look for here? This is what industries need to do. They would be derelict in their duty if they weren't basically synergising with all other industries. This is what they have to do. And so we need to think of pornography as an industry. To such a point that this is an article from Adult Video News, which is the major trade paper of the porn industry. And they're very, very happy in Adult Video News because they're saying here that 1 in 5 men at any one time on a porn website is defined as an addict, a porn addict. And this is an article celebrating that. And then they go on to say that how can they keep the addict more addicted? Because the problem with addicts is once they've ejaculated, they tend to leave the porn sites. So this is an article to software designers, how to create software to keep the addict more addicted, as is on the websites. But of course they're going to do that, just as the alcohol industry does that, and just as the tobacco industry does that. Again, they would be derelict in their duty if they didn't. Now, to tell the story of pornography, and again, last night somebody said, oh, we've always had pornography. Probably some truth in that, right? Probably the first time a man realised he could make some kind of thing in the ground, we had pornography, okay? However, I'm talking about the industry, and the industry began in 1953 with the first edition of Playboy magazine, because that was the first time ever pornography got circulated through the mainstream channels of American capitalism. Now, in 1953, post-Second World War America, they needed to rebuild the economy, but there was a problem, and this sounds ridiculous today, but the problem in post-Second World War America was Americans didn't know how to spend money, because they were brought up during a depression and a world war. So you had to create a consumer culture. Hence, television grew up in the 1950s for women. But where were you going to teach men, upwardly mobile, white middle-class men, who had all of this disposable income, where were you going to teach them how to spend money? Enter Hugh Hefner. Brilliant. When you look at this image, at Playboy, there's virtually no pictures of women in here. But there's like a 6-page article on what ice bucket to buy, 4-page article on what suit to buy. It is teaching him how to consume. And the real message in Playboy was, listen, if you consume at the level we tell you to consume, you'll get the real prize, which is the girls in the magazine. Now, this is the brilliance. He didn't only commodify sexuality, which is what we often say porn does. He didn't just commodify sexuality, he also sexualized commodities. And this was a brilliant plan on his part. So in 1953, in comes Playboy, sells out overnight, massive success. He runs the show till 1969. In the Chicago Tribune and the New York Times, there's a picture of a bunny in the crosshairs of a rifle, and underneath it says, we're going bunny hunting. And this was the ad for Penthouse. And then, between 1969 and 1973, there was a war between Playboy and Penthouse to see who could create the most explicit magazine. Now, Penthouse won the battle but lost the war because it became so explicit that all the advertisers ran from Penthouse and went back to Playboy. Now, why is this important? It's important because in this war between 69 and 73, they were pushing the economic and cultural envelope in America about what was acceptable pornography. The more explicit, the more they were grooming the society for hardcore porn. And this wasn't lost on a strip club owner in Ohio who was watching this, because in 1973 he came out with the first edition of Hustler. Now, I never thought I would say this, but these were the good old days. Right? This was the good old days. And this was basically the map of pornography. Playboy, Penthouse, Hustler. That was it. And then, of course, the internet hit and everything changed. And now we need to talk about the post-internet society. And we need to talk about certain things that made it possible. Key to mainstreaming the porn culture was Jenna Jameson. Do you all know who this is? Put your hand up if you know who it is. Okay, in America, whenever I lecture, every single person knows who this is. No, actually looks like Marilyn Monroe, but no. Right, what's important about her, because everyone knows who she is in America, is never before would you be able to find a woman from pornography that everybody knew who it was. She is the first ever porn star. She was a porn star in that she moved seamlessly from pornography to pop culture and back again. No woman had ever done that before. And because of that, she has become a major recruitment tool for working class girls looking at minimum wage labour. You see, you're sitting at home in the middle of America somewhere, looking at Walmart, you know, $4 or whatever it is minimum wage you get in these places, and she comes on television. And Oprah Winfrey is absolutely salivating all over, as she was recently, how wonderful she is and how wealthy she is. And you're sitting there thinking, you know, I could make this work for me. Because you don't really know what you're getting into. You think you're going into an industry where you're going to look like this and behave like this. You don't know that you're going into an industry where you have a shelf life of 3 months because the brutality is so much women's bodies can't tolerate. That's the porn industry's number, 3 months. You don't know you're going into an industry where one of the biggest health problems for you is your anus dropping out because you get such rough anal sex. You get rectal prolapses all the time. You don't know that. You don't know that you're going into an industry where you may get gonorrhea of the eye because men are ejaculating into your eye. You don't know these things. Nobody's telling telling you this. You just know that Jenna Jameson looks like she's having a wonderful time. And she has been a major recruitment tool, because when I first started this, I would bet a very high percentage of women were going into the industry were victims of child sexual abuse. The boot camp, as Andrea Dworkin used to call it, for pornography. But I bet you less and less women now. Doesn't mean there's not a high percentage of child sexual victims, abuse victims, but I'm telling you now, many of the women I interview, and when I see them across the colleges, they have been recruited through the mass media and through pop culture for this.